Good afternoon from eBizRadio.com. I'm Nick von Stein. Today with me, we're going to be just starting a series of podcasts on data, and we're going to be going in depth with data. But to be able to do that, we have to give a broad oversight of the topic, as well as the company we're going to be chatting with today, which is called Atvance Intellect. I've got Jayson O'Reilly from them today. He's the general manager, and we're going to be discussing his company that he's part of, as well as data in general, as well as laying the framework for all of our other podcasts. Hello, Jayson. It's nice to chat. How are you today?
Nick, very well, thank you. And thanks for having us.
So, data is such a large concept, but we're going to be unpacking it one by one. Just for some background for people who don't know, anytime you do anything online, you're giving off data. You're even giving off data when you don't know it. To such an extent that data replaced oil as one of the largest sectors of the global economy, something worth over $2 trillion at the moment and exponentially growing. So we're going to be unpacking all of that at a later stage, but a good place to begin with is your business history as well as the history of Atvance Intellect. So talk to us about the company.
Yeah, thanks very much, and appreciate the intro about data. It's something we talk a lot about with customers, even though a lot of them don't realize that specifically in our area of expertise, which is in the information security space, it is all about the data, which is interesting. From an advanced intellect perspective, we started our journey just over 2.5 years ago. There were 5 guys that decided, coming out of respective, trusted and well-known vendors and partners and resellers in the community, that there has to be a better way to do the things that are currently being done. So we had a look at a business model. We had a look at our vendor strategy. We decided who is at the center of our nucleus. And we all believe that it focused around customer-centric services, understanding the way the market's going. So we started off quite humbly. I think when any business starts, you've got to have what they call your anchor customer. And we were very fortunate, being in the industry for over 20 years myself, and then my business partners collectively for almost 150 years. It gave us a really good insight into some really great relationships. One thing that we didn't quite realize, specifically in the data and the information security space, is customers buy from people, which is great, and people would definitely buy from you. But more importantly, they buy the company, the vision, the mission, who you partner with, and ultimately the value proposition that you bring to them in their world. So like any company, we assume that the brands that we hold in the industry would help us be successful, and success for us was starting. That was the most important thing. And like with any small to medium business becoming a larger business, we had hiccups like most. The best thing that we really did was focus. So as a business, we chose data as our core competency, but we also realized that data was probably split in 2 sectors. 1, the protection of data, and 2, the ability to use data to help organize, enrich their businesses and create better profits and more efficiencies. So the business consists of those 2 legs today, which are managed by 2 general managers, one being myself and my colleague Sean Robenheimer, who I understand is also going to be your podcast. But I need to say, none of this would be possible without an investor that understood our strategy and our journey, right? So we were very fortunate. We were a part of the Advanced group of companies, whom today educate almost 30,000 students on a regular basis, with a diverse company in our academy division, and also in our risk division. So again, it was our visionary Johan Engelbrecht that effectively brought us all together. And today, much stronger group of companies, ultimately focusing on education, risk, and then of course cyber and data. So it's been a hell of a journey, and I think we've definitely aged through it. But I think, as of today, we have some great customers. We've really focused on the service delivery to the clients, but also, we've also had to focus on how we do things differently. And the primary way we do that is, a lot of the technologies today in our space and the services in our space have become more complex. Our customers have got more technologies in their environments more than ever before. So when we looked at our value proposition, it was really around how do we help customers bring this together, all the while trying to help them reduce costs, because that's a huge pressure on our data teams and our information protection teams today, is around how do we help them reduce this. So the journey's been great. With the right funders and with the right customers, we've been able to build a business, and we're going strong, which is awesome. We're in the right place, I think, at the right time. Cyber and information security and data are the right place to be. But I think there's still a lot of noise and a lot of misunderstanding out there. So, it's our jobs to partner with our customers and help them understand, how we help them do it more effectively. And it's been a great journey. And again, we can only thank the investors and our customers that have trusted what we've brought on board.
That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. Now, I just want to create a little bubble of conversation because I have to bring up this topic at the moment. For those that are listening in the future at any specific time, we are currently smack bang in the middle of South Africa's first ever lockdown in democratic times. This is due to the coronavirus. Obviously, it's affecting everyone's life, whether on a personal level because you have the virus or you're scared of the virus, but also on an economic level. Obviously, we're going through a bit of an economic catastrophe at the moment, to put it nicely, and that's worrying for everyone involved. Just a little bit of a talk around how you guys have approached the virus, and also I think maybe it's a podcast to have at a later time, but how data has driven this particular pandemic, because we can respond a lot better than we used to be able to because of data.
Correct. So look, I think from our perspective, from day one, we were building what we termed as a platform strategy in our business. And when we say platform strategy in our business, I think, one of the things that, I think the world has seen, I read a really great article in LinkedIn yesterday around in 2008 when there was an economic downturn, the companies that were founded in that period of time. So the likes of Uber, the likes of Netflix, the likes of Instagram, all of these companies came through in a time where you needed to re-envisage what it is that people are doing, how they're consuming things, and I think with the likes of COVID, it's really highlighted that a lot of our organizations, a lot of the world, we're on this digital transformation journey, right? And it's all about how do we consume the internet in its best format. Because unfortunately, there's also a very dark side of the internet, right? And we won't get into that. But the point is, how we looked at this as a business, like everybody, we've got our policies, we've got our strategies. But more importantly, for us, it was not a huge disruptor, right? Having started our business, 27 months ago, what was critical for us was, do we have bricks and mortar? Do we need to have an office where people can come and see us? And initially not. For us it wasn't important. For us what is important was helping customers understand how we're changing the dynamics of what's happening in information security and data, and how that can be consumed better through different platforms and different strategies, as opposed to having a very people-heavy centric strategy. And it doesn't mean get rid of people. It means let's get the right people for the right job at the right time. And I think that's what the world, if you look at what COVID-19 has done, is it's really got people thinking about where they're spending their money. Do we need to have 100 offices globally, or can we scale that down to 50 offices and have 49 home offices where I've got the capability? COVID-19 has forced that capability. I mean, we saw Microsoft Teams explode to over 45 million users globally, right? And that's not even to talk about Skype and Zoom and all those other platforms. So I think digital transformation was a twinkle in many people's eyes and a journey they were starting. COVID-19 brought was that exponential bang that they weren't expecting to get ready now and have it done now. So, we've seen a lot of people initially in the first week from a crisis perspective where, typically some of our larger organizations have got, workforces, almost 50% of their workforces come into the office, log in from a machine that they log into. Now, these people are forced to go home, right? So we saw people running around buying laptops and figure out how do we enable this corporate function. And, now we're into, day 11, day 12, and we're seeing that's calmed down. Now people are just getting into the way of doing things. The challenge comes in as a country, when you look at digital transformation and how few organizations are actually prepared for it. And also as a country and as a continent, how there are so few people. When you start to put it into perspective, digital transformation is great, leveraging the internet is great. I think you come back to the conversation to say, well, how many people have access to it? And that's the biggest thing. I mean, if you look at our academy business, we educate 30,000 students, but what does that take? Well, that takes devices, it takes getting people to those rural places, spinning up universities. That business has been impacted hugely. They're looking at learning management systems now as to how they can move forward. So I think what COVID-19 has done is it's changed that digital transformation journey to being a 3 to 5 year journey to now being a 12-month to 18-month journey. Absolutely.
Yeah, in some cases 2 weeks. And I think something that will definitely be seen in the forthcoming recession, something that will definitely be seen is those companies that are able to adapt to a digital environment or that already had a digital environment or presence will do a lot better and maybe even grow, as opposed to the disaster that you'll see on Main Street, so to say.
Agreed. And I think if we look at the US, we look at Europe, we look at China, and all those pretty well established countries from a digital perspective and how they consume those services, right? I mean, we were just having a chat watching the news at CNN the other evening and just saying, UPS is still running and doing businesses every day because, again, if you look at the way that they transact and what they do, 24 hours you can have a package, right? And not to say it's any different in the African territories, but I think your distances that you have to cover, the range that you have to cover, the kind of economies that you look at, it's just different scales. So I think from that perspective, adoption in our territory is a little bit slower. The central hubs will always take absolute advantage and do what needs to get done. But I think if you look at the African continent as a whole, and connectivity and data, obviously we've seen now, how data has been slashed by Vodacom and MTN, and I'm sure the rest will follow. We're starting to see that becoming the norm, right? It's something that has to change because it's now become an essential service.
It really has become an essential service. I mean, You just think of the difference in just personal safety between having to go to a shop to get stuff and just ordering it online via some vendor. There's such a big difference.
Yeah, Agreed. And I mean, again, if you look at the small percentage of people that take advantage, specifically in South Africa and the rest of Africa, that take advantage of those services, they haven't quite scaled yet, right? This is going to change that. This will change that, definitely.
And obviously there's an issue over financing. Most people in Africa, in South Africa, never mind the rest of Africa, obviously, are not middle class or upper class. They're lower class. That's changing. But what we'll see is as economics of scale take effect and as these economies continue to grow and you get a larger middle class over time, so these new distribution patterns will take over.
Yes. Well, listen, I mean, you know what? I think if you look at what President Cyril Ramaphosa has done together with other leaders in our country with regards to the contributions that not only corporate says that it's going to commit, as well as individuals. I mean, the one thing that Corona has done globally is show the human spirit, right? So it doesn't matter what we're doing or how we're doing it. The human spirit at this point in time, and how people are pulling together and figuring out how they can fund that lower class to middle class is really, I think that's going to be an enormous focus over the next 18 months when we get through the basics of the challenges we're facing now. But I think you'll start to see the different funding engines and where money is pointed to, and where people are starting to invest. Again, because just like if we look at America and we look at China, right, the major thing they have is scale and how people have access to those services. I think from an African perspective, the minute that we build scale and we make those services available to the poorest of poor through the right funding engines, I think we have the opportunity to change people's lives in a way that we would have never experienced it before.
Now, taking what we've just said back to Atvance Intellect, that all is going to require a lot of data, and a lot of data analyzing, a lot of data protection.
Yes.
Where do you guys see yourselves in the market in the next 5 years? I mean, obviously, let's just put the corona and the recession aside, and eventually we'll get back to a growing point in a year or two, hopefully. If you take that as a launching point, where do you think we are going to be by the end of this decade?
Well, so fortunately during this time I've had the opportunity to do a wealth of learning. So we represent a number of global leaders from a vendor perspective and from a services perspective globally, and one of the things that we've realized, so to give you an idea, in our market space, and this is specifically the sales of services and technologies, right? Last year alone, that was around about $120 billion globally. And that's just from a information protection perspective, right? That's not even looking at data analytics and how data can better be mined. So again, from our purposes, I represent the information security and the cyber business, and one of the clear things that we're seeing is that is going to triple in the next 3 to 5 years. And what that basically means at the end of the day is that more organizations, more people, more governments are going to be consuming data services. In other words, digitizing and figuring out how they can provide better service to us, the citizens, better service to the consumer, that organizations, and then also the ability to, what we talk about, total look at microservices. So what we've seen probably in the last, I'd probably say 9 months, and thanks to the likes of Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Cisco, Oracle, all these big name brands, is the consumer of those services is demanding that you have the capability to switch it on and off at any time that you consume those services, right? So it's become a very consumer focused market that we've seen. So when we look at the growth, we can see it quite easily getting to $500 billion to $1 trillion, right? And I think the critical thing is why that's important for our business is coming back to the journey of digitizing and moving to where we are as a country around the fourth industrial revolution. It talks about being able to take advantage of these digital services. Well, yes, but it also talks about it, but we haven't seen enough about it. It talks about doing it in a safe manner, in a manner that's not going to be exploited, in a manner where fraud isn't going to be achieved. And the biggest challenge we're seeing right now is the ability to provide those services in the safest possible way. And that's why we're extremely relevant as a business, right? If you look at what our business does, we focus on the cradle to the grave approach with our customers. We want to understand where they are, we want to help where they're going, but at the same time, we can't accept to sell them more than they've ever had before, or service than they ever had. So you've got to try and do it far more safer, far more cheaper, and far more in a consumerized version than it is. So, that's what we've been setting up our business for over the last 27 months with the partners that we've done.
I just want to jump in there, just to go back to what you were talking about over the concerns around data. And we're going to be having an entire podcast on this. But I just would like to point this out, particular to listeners, is from the mid-2000s, probably till about the middle of the last decade, the data was the wild, wild west. Companies all across the world, and governments as well, were accumulating these vast troves of data and doing with it as they please. But as these concerns have become more and more public, more and more raised, as more and more companies and businesses have accessed the power of data, these concerns have come up. And so there's a whole discussion to be had around data morality, and also how do you democratize data. So for instance, I was having a conversation a few months ago with someone also on this idea of monetizing data, and they were saying that a way to bring people on board with using of data is to give them money back. If their data is being used as part of a company's marketing campaign, even if it's anonymously, give them some money, a few cents back over time, and then through multiple companies you can start getting this infusion of money into the broader population, which is of course good for everyone.
So you bring up a very good point, right? So one of the critical things about data management and about data governance, right, and how it's managed and who manages it and who's got access to it is the governance aspect of it. So one of the critical things that we're seeing is globally people are adopting far more stringent privacy strategies and governance strategies around the handling of data. The most recent one, as pop here, has yet to be released, right? The most recent one is the Californian Consumer Protection Act, which is Ccpa in acronym terms, right? And then there's, of course, the European standard, the GDPR standard. If you look at how that Ccpa is more of the relevant one. The Ccpa, which is the Californian Consumer Protection Act, talks about exactly what you're saying, is that the consumer has to be compensated for the use of their data for me to be marketed to. Sort of makes sense, right? Again, in a capitalist society, only one person's getting rich because he sits at the top of the food chain, right? Whereas in the models specifically around data usage, and specifically if you look at the CCPA and what it's starting to orchestrate, is saying, listen, it's fine that the guy at the top gets rich, but let's start feeding the rest of the community with the strategy of, if you want to have access to my data and I condone you having access to my data, then I need you to pay for my data.
Yeah, there must be a payoff. If there's no payoff, it sounds exploitative. And that's what it feels like at the moment, because at the truth of the day, data has a bad reputation, and it has a deservedly bad reputation at the moment, I would say, because there's this feeling of exploitation. When at the end of the day, it's there to make your life easier. Yes, a company can make more money off of it, but let everyone share that part.
Look, it's a great initiative, and I think California is definitely leading the way, and there are a number of others that will follow and have different versions thereof. I think the most important part is there's well-meaning, and well-meaning is everybody shares. But unfortunately, we need to understand that there's a dark side of this, and the dark side of it. And there was a plea. Now again, I'm a LinkedIn fanatic. That's my social media of choice. And there was a plea from a national government to all cyber terrorists and cyber hackers out there. Just stop attacking our hospitals. Stop attacking some of these state entities that are currently servicing COVID-19. So that brings back the different conversation, right? Is unfortunately, as we take this journey, whether your data or not your data, or how we digitize or how we don't digitize, there is always this element of bad. And the element of bad is the one that we really need to make sure at the end of the day that enables all of these respective services and governance models and enrichment opportunities. Because the challenge that we have is that not everybody has security in mind when they're building the service. Security only comes after the fact, or the fact that they've been breached, or the fact that fraud has happened. So, one of the things that we've really struggled with, and I say we as an industry and as a global community, is how do we bake safety into the services we deliver. And that's one of the biggest, we've seen in South Africa, which is great. We're starting to see these breaches happening because they're out there. City Power, City of Joburg, not to point any, Standard Bank, 4 or 5 years ago got breached.
It happens all the time. Yeah, it happens on a weekly basis. Yeah.
The problem is, in our territory, is it's not highly governed. And with POPIA coming, I think that's going to allow the consumer to make better choices about people that are making better decisions to secure their data and their privacy, right? Because the minute that information is on the web, it becomes commercial. It becomes a cost. Somebody can buy your credit card for $1. Somebody can buy your identity for $10, right? So those are the kind of things that we need to make sure of. Is as much as governance is important, and privacy and your rights as a human being and ethics and all those things, that we start to enforce the function that security and being secure, regardless of what service that you offer or how you offer it. If security and securing the information is not the paramount object of the service and making it, then what's the point of it all, right? When somebody else in a different country, because there's no borders in cyber, right? There are no borders across countries in cyber.
Yeah, just like the virus, there's no borders.
Exactly, there are zero borders, right? And I think this is the biggest challenge that we have, is that because there are no borders, and also now with the internet, what organizations used to assume was their border is no longer the border because COVID-19 has hit. Now I've got 30,000 staff that are all sitting at home. Now I need to create 30,000 little borderless bordered areas. It's an absolute nightmare. So when we start to look at information, data, because remember, that's the only thing that people that are not well-doers or doing things for non-profit are after at the end of the day. They're looking for people's information. They're looking for organizations' IP. They're looking for a way to exploit. They're looking for a way to put ransomware on an environment. It's so again, I think as we look at the great things that we see the opportunity, and COVID has brought that forward, we also need to be very mindful of the fact that security needs to be baked in from the start of any developmental service that is going to be delivered. And unfortunately, because we're not a highly regulated, what there is there's King, right? King 1 to 4, which really focuses on doing the right thing. With POPIA, that changes the conversation, because the minute that a brand gets exposed, as a consumer of that brand, I start to make different decisions. So, we're looking forward to regulation coming into our territory, which will change the behavior, we believe, of many of the people that make decisions in business, because we still have a reasonable disconnect between how you secure the information and how you create a new service to take to the market. And we're looking forward to different aspects of digitization being embodied by regulation as well as governance.
Lastly, Jayson, can we get some contact details and online information for Atvance Intellect?
Yeah, absolutely. We've obviously got our handle, which is www.advance-intellect.co.za. Again, all of our information is on the website. Information handle from a LinkedIn perspective, just Jayson O'Reilly. And again, we're a 24/7 organization. We know a lot of our customers are looking at different challenges right now. The one thing we do pride ourselves on is being available and ready to help our customers with the challenges they may have around digital. So log onto the website, find me up on LinkedIn. We're available even just to have a conversation. We have access to many folks in the industry and also globally. So we're happy to help with any challenges that folks may face in the data and the information security perspective. Nick?
To all the listeners, this is the first in a bunch of podcasts we'll be doing with On Data. So this was just the introduction, a taste of what's to come. And Jayson will probably have you on again in the future to talk about your subsection of the company. But thank you so much for your time today and for doing the introduction.
Nick, thank you again. And I look forward to the rest of the podcasts, man.